on demand, and we provide multiple interfaces into those environments. People most commonly use our browser-based IDE to interface with these server-side environments, but as we'll talk about, there's also a CLI and an API set that can be used to access these systems as well. And a little bit later this year, we're also going to be providing integrations so that your traditional IDEs, such as Eclipse, IntelliJ, or Sublime Text, can integrate directly with these developer environments as well. We're in the business of eliminating inefficiencies in the software development cycle. The value of on-demand environments is about getting rid of configuration. There's many days that have been lost with having to go through the step-by-step process of setting up an environment on a desktop or a laptop or across the team. Oftentimes, there's a lot of effort that goes into synchronizing projects and then keeping the plugins into the IDE synchronized as well. So there's an update cycle in order to maintain interoperability. As a result, when you have to recreate these environments, you end up with longer debug cycles. And since development environments are distributed and oftentimes on desktops, they become non-standardized and uncontrolled, and so there's risks introduced, particularly from bring your own devices. So this is the value of Codenvy, and this is the problems that we solve. We started the company at the beginning of 2013. We're a Series A funded company. We're backed by some fantastic venture capitalists. We have 40 employees in the company. We're based in 2 countries, in Eastern Europe and in San Francisco. Our product, we now have 100,000 users on our public cloud. They span 55 countries, and our users represent a lot of the Fortune 100. And at one point in time, we've had 2,000 concurrent developers all programming on the system at the same time. We have 4 products in the marketplace: Codenvy, which is our hosted site at codenvy.com; Codenvy Enterprise, which is an on-premises installation on your own hardware of the very same system; and then a set of capabilities for ISVs that we call Codenvy ISV, which will be the bulk of our conversation today, and an affiliate program for those people who want referrals. We've been quiet in the marketplace from a marketing perspective, but even though we're a 1-year-old company, we've done some interesting work. We've acquired some fantastic customers with Google, Espresso Logic, Intuit, WSO2, Exo Platform, mostly software vendors right now, which are early adopters that are purchasing into our ISV offerings and the enterprise offerings there. With that, let's get into the topic of the day. There are 4 ways to extend Codenvy. One is, we give users some preferences, such as being able to tailor the key bindings, upload specific keys, and change the theme. The second is factories, which allows developers to integrate and embed Codenvy within other products on the marketplace, and we have kind of a very rich set of capabilities around that. There's also a plugin system provided with an SDK runtime so that you can create new features or your own cloud IDE on demand. And then also APIs that we provide. And we've released a couple of, but before the end of this quarter, we'll have about 10 significant APIs in the marketplace. We're going to talk about each of these topics today, and we're going to go through them one by one. First, on the preferences. With the system that we have today, it's a very kind of simplistic preferences system. You can change the key bindings. You can customize the icons and functions that are on the toolbar. There is a theme change in there where you can have the white theme or the dark theme, and you have some formatter options as well. So very, very simplistic sort of stuff. This is available to every user in the preferences item on the help menu that's there. Coming out later this quarter, this is a screenshot of our next generation system. We started working on this at the at the middle of 2012. So it's been a number of quarters in the making. And this system is based upon our new plugin framework. But with that plugin framework comes a lot more extensibility for the users. In this look and feel, you can see that there's a much more efficient use of space, the tabs along the edges on the bottom. There's also a button mechanism that can map to shell commands available on the bottom. And we've eliminated a lot of the user and administrative management off to a separate screen that's there. So we've focused on high degree of configurability, high degree of power and performance, and really try to create a workbench that allows for very productive development on complex business style applications that's there. With this system, there will be defaults for both a light theme and a dark theme, and there will be an extension mechanism so that you can tailor which tabs are located on each section, the size of those tabs, and how they develop. And also with that, you'll also have the ability to customize the buttons that are mapped to macro commands in the system, so that you can have not just the 5 buttons on the bottom, but you can have hundreds of them that map to a variety of commands that's there. So you can start to build up a nice library of macro-based functions against the system itself. So this capability is going to go into private beta this quarter. We expect to ship a good portion of it to our premium accounts and some of our free accounts this quarter as well, and we'll continue to be working on this throughout the year. With that, we're going to spend most of our time here talking about factories, APIs, and plugins. Factories is our way of providing a completely clonable development environment. And if, we had this realization about 1.5 years ago where we were talking with each other and we said, hey, what's the big value of cloud? And one of the criteria that we kept coming back to was instant. It was instant. It was instant. And when we thought about that, we said, okay, if the real value of cloud is instant, what does it mean to do instant development? And what instant development meant for us was that you needed to be able to click on something, and within a matter of seconds, you should have a fully functional project that you could code, build, analyze dependencies, run, debug, share. And so if that was the objective, we said, well, geez, we're probably getting in the way of that. And what we need to do is we need to eliminate account management, authentication, the project setup, the code cloning. Let's automate all those items for developers so that for those people who want to get started quickly, they can do so. And so that's what we did with a factory. With the old way, it was about setting everything up all at once. And with a factory, it was just click it, launch it, and it will automatically develop the environment that's there. So as a real quick example, I'm going to switch over to my browser. And we put these factories right up on our website. And so, just for the fun of it, I'm going to click that spring icon there, and that's a factory. And what happens is it's going and creating an environment. It's cloning the project. I'm sure a lot of people have seen this. And it's loading the IDE, caching it if you haven't used this before, and then it activates everything in here. And if you notice, it's created us a workspace, and we're now a user in this workspace here. And it's a fully functional environment. You can go and run this application. It'll obviously kick off a build, and once the build is done, it'll launch a VM that's running the application itself. When you do a factory, right, and we're going to talk about ways for people to create factories, customize them, and work on them themselves. But a factory is simply a URL that allows you to launch a temporary on-demand developer environment. It's temporary in the sense that as long as the developer stays active in the new environment created, it will be there. But the moment that the developer becomes inactive or they close the tab, then that temporary environment will be destroyed and reclaimed back into the system that's there. The environment is fully functional. It contains an IDE. There's the project, the code, the builder, the debugger, and the plugins as well inside of it. The way it works is that either a user or an ISV, you need to go and create an application that you want to share. And so you use your normal Codenvy account, or you could just have it point to a code repository. But once you have an application that you want to share, you then create the factory, and you provide the factory URL to the user. The user will then click on it, and then behind the scenes, we go through the provisioning activities. And after we go through the provisioning activities, then we generate the temporary workspace. Every click on the factory generates a new temporary workspace. So if you provide this factory and give it to 10 users, even though it's one factory, 10 clicks will generate 10 separate abilities there. We've seen a lot of adoption of factories. On any given day, we're seeing tens of thousands of factory sessions across hundreds of factories that have been pinned out there. The most common uses for them is training. Instructors, both in universities and in corporate training environments, like to use them to create examples. They can create one example template, send the factory to all the students, and then all the students can work on their own copy on their own. It's very popular with marketing. We've got some demos here of various situations where you essentially can provide a demo environment against an API or a plugin. So anytime that you need to market or sell directly to a developer, it provides a very simple way to do it. It's great for collaboration. Factories are a good way to start for a hackathon where you just don't want to deal with project configuration there. And we've also seen them used in blogs where blog authors provide code examples, and then they offer the factory link off to it. And we're starting to see some support use cases as well, where if you're having a technical exchange between a support engineer and the customer, they can use factories to exchange environments through URL. We've got some great demos. Factories so far have been adopted by WSO2. WSO2 uses it to launch projects on demand from their app factory, which is a lifecycle management solution. Into it, if you're doing QuickBooks Online, you can do an extension to QuickBooks Online, and the extension development is launched by a factory. They used to have a 45-step setup guide, and now it's a 5-step setup guide as a result of that. Google launches factories for the Google MBS. We've got that demo we can show. Atlassian later this quarter is going to be embedding factories on their Bitbucket repositories so that every Bitbucket repository can launch an environment this way. And we've seen examples at other companies as well. We have different types of factories. We're going to talk about our public factories and managed factories. A lot of what we provide is entirely free for use on it. The managed factories offers a branded experience for software vendors who want to have a high degree of control over the environment, and that's a premium offering that we provide in the marketplace. So let's walk through this real quick. So a factory can be launched without the authentication of users. We do not need to know who that user is in advance. Anybody who can click on the URL will get this loading environment there. Once it's loaded, the factory URL is a very long one, but it then changes, and you can see that it's placed into a temporary workspace there. And each click will generate a different ID and workspace. And this workspace is available. It's free. It's fully functional. The only limitation on this temporary workspace is that the work cannot be preserved beyond the session that's there. Your work can be saved. You can edit it. You can debug it, but it can't be preserved and persisted beyond that. So we allow people to create a free account, and if you create a free account, you can then copy your work over into that account where it can be preserved indefinitely. Inside of even though it's a temporary workspace, you can do collaboration. So you can take the temporary workspace URL and you can share it with other people. So it is possible to do Google Docs style collaboration even though it's temporary. And then once you have worked on your project, any person can take any project and create a factory of their own off of that. So if you go into the share menu, there is a factory URL item in the share menu, and you can take any existing project that you have functioning inside of Codenvy, and we give you a little bit of a wizard here that will generate the URL. And you can see that we give you different ways to embed it. You can embed it on GitHub. You can embed it on your website, or we can just give you the direct URL that you can share as well. And you can start getting in the far right corner over here. You can see a little bit about the format of the factory URL, which is a bunch of parameters. There's a bunch of parameters in there, and it's those instructions that tell us how to create the environment on demand. Then beyond that, beyond the simple creation, you then have a lot of flexibility in telling and configuring how the factories work. So the one thing you can do is you can specify and instruct to us which file should be open in the system after the factory finishes loading the project. And so there's a property for that. You can copy your project at any point in time to your own workspace, or you can continue to work in the temporary workspace. We detect we detect whether or not you have an account with us. If you don't have an account, we'll say, please log in or create an account. And if you do have an account, we'll just say, hey, welcome back. Would you like to keep it in the temporary workspace or copy it into your named workspace? And then we also offer two types of factory URLs. There are non-encoded URLs, right, where anybody can construct this URL format and provide the properties for the configuration of the system there. Or you can do an encoded URL, which allows you have to use our API, and with that API you pass in all the parameters that you want to configure that factory, and in exchange we'll return this encoded URL that's there. The non-encoded URLs are open, right? So you don't have to communicate with us at all to construct it. You just follow the specification format that we've documented on docs.codenvy.com, and as long as you follow that format, any URL that matches that format we'll accept and we'll honor it there. There are certain advanced parameters that require the encoded URL format, and we document the differences there on our documentation page. Factories can be embedded on other applications and other websites. The screenshot here on the right is our blog, and so we're running that blog on WordPress, and inside of that blog is an AngularJS IDE that's running inside of it. So it can be iframed. You can specify the width. We do some smart things to be able to handle that, and there's certain minimums that you want to adhere to there, but that is an option that's available. So real quick, some interesting demos. We can distribute this presentation, and you guys can see these demos of people using factories. The one I'm going to take us to real quick is Espresso Logic. Interesting. Of course, Murphy's Law to show up where Espresso Logic's demo is not working here. Okay, we'll go to another one. We'll do another demo. We'll launch the So on the WSO2 demo, this is a video here as a backup, just in case Murphy gets in the way. But what we're showing here is WSO2 has a hosted cloud service. In that hosted cloud service is a product called App Factory. And App Factory is a lifecycle management for enterprise development. And what that means is that you can use App Factory to create a project. they'll then create the Git repository and also the runtime environments for staging, production, and development with that. So as the developer is working on their enterprise application, that enterprise developer is building ESB artifacts. They're working with identity servers. They're working with analytics information. And so it's a multi-node SOA type architecture application that's there. And so this view here is showing App Factory, all the projects that are available across the team. And they're loading a set of repositories. And this is one of the repositories, and they said, hey, let's edit the code. When they click on the edit, it launches a factory off in another browser tab. The factory is coded to point back to get that code repository, which is private. So it did an OAuth exchange to pick up the private code repository. We transparently handle the authentication. So now you have an ESB project here. And they're demonstrating the ability to run this project. It had a default file loaded. The project runs as a simple JSP file. And now the developer is going to quickly make an edit. And what this next thing is going to demonstrate is that even though it was cloned from a private repository, the Git system is already pre-configured to point back to the remote that it came from. So when they commit, it's committing to the local repository, but they're going to be able to do a remote push, and WSO2's code repository is already pre-configured as part of the system. So even though the developer just clicked one link, they didn't have to configure App Factory, they didn't have to configure the private repository, and they didn't have to reconfigure Git to be able to push its changes back to them. And the rest of this demo is just showing that the web app back at WSO2 has been updated with the change that was made there. So very fast-paced demo for sure on that. It's a great example of a factory where the factory is launched and wired back into the source system that it came from. And the other demos that we have, work the same way, and we can provide those as well for you. Some other things that can be changed with factories, a lot of customization options here. You can customize a factory icon with your company's logo. So there's a button format. The button is animated. If you hover on the little code part, we do a little animation there to let people know that it's a factory. Then we have a bunch of other parameters that can be configured as part of the URL format. This is the link to that. And the things that you can configure are meta information, so which version of our factory API, project name, workspace name, code. Which code repository are you going to source the source code from? What's that code URL? What specific branch or reference or commit ID do you want to clone it from? Post-load actions, including opening the file, specifying the type of project. Is it a Java project? Is it an Angular project? And what sort of builder and runner needs to be there? Style items, and then policies. So all that's available on our free public factories. We have a ton of documentation online. We've got a lot of examples. We'd be happy to help you get up to speed with that. Moving on to managed factories, which is the premium offering that we have, there's a bunch of things that we can do here. The first is that when you become a managed factories customer, we assign to you an ID. You insert that code into all your factories. It's very simple to do. And then once we do that, we can track adoption, engagement, and abandonment much the way that Google Analytics does for a website. We can do that for all your developer environments as well. So, and we do it across all your factories. So the ID acts as a tracking code that allows us to summarize that. The next thing is that you can badge the IDE. So you have the ability to place the company's logo right in the environment that's there, in the upper right. You also have the ability to completely change the welcome message. And the welcome message on the right, you can vary it by whether someone is authenticated or not. so you can give completely different sort of experience there. We'll load the content from an endpoint that you provide, so it can be an animated content, it can be graphical content, it can be anything that you want to do on the right side. You can also parameterize the factories. What this means is that you have the ability to create a factory, have the factory point to some source code, but then after we have cloned the code into the workspace, we will then do a find replace on a set of variables inside of the cloned code. The use of this that we've seen, this actually came from a request from Intuit to us. And in the case of Intuit, what they wanted to do is they wanted their plugin developers to have the resulting developer workspace connect to the developer's API using each developer's individual API key. So the code was all the same, but inside of the code, there were certain variables that needed to be replaced with the value that belonged to the developer who was clicking on the link. And so that value was not going to be known until the developer clicked on the link. And so they used the parameterized capability here to do the find replace. And now the developer has not only gets to use the API, but it's using the API with their own personal tokenization after the fact. There's the ability to do policies, so you can specify behaviors such as the beginning time and the ending time of a factory. If a factory is tried to click before the valid since parameter is specified, we'll do a graceful failure to the end user, basically saying that this factory is not currently available for use. And if they do a click on it after the time, we also do the same graceful failure. We've seen this feature used most commonly in classrooms, particularly universities, where they have exams and they want to have examples that are only available during the time of the exam, not before and after it. Also, with managed factories, we do faster performance. We actually detect that it's your factory set, and we route it to dedicated hardware. When we run our public cloud, the community free subscriptions, everybody's on shared hardware, and we do kind of a very dense management of that shared hardware. We do promotion as well, so we reserve the featured factories section of our website for managed factory customers. And we also, in the next generation of our system, we're going to put these featured factories in the wizard of the IDE itself. That's a big mouthful. It's kind of an overview of the capability that we provide with our factories. A lot of this stuff is free. We encourage you to start experimenting with them and playing with them. Get in touch with us if you need any help. We're happy to help with all those items. We have a lot more capabilities coming out with factories in the future. Big items that you'll be able to do is actually change which Codenvy plugins are loaded when your factory is selected, and you'll actually be able to change the entire theming of the environment as well. So you can create a completely separate branded experience for each developer one at a time. All right, let's move on to talk a little bit about our APIs. APIs allow remote clients to access Codenvy services natively. We have a couple of APIs documented at docs.codenvy.com/API, and those are two that are publicly available for everyone else. The rest of our APIs are now in limited beta. We have APIs for all the key objects within the system: workspaces, users, accounts, the builder for being able to do dependency management, compilation, packaging, and unit testing, and also the debugger for managing images, setting them up, executing processes within those images, and then tearing them down. There's APIs for creating and managing factories. We have authentication, and then there's also an analytics API so that you can get statistics against your account or also groups of users for benchmarking performance as well. Everything in our APIs is REST-based. They're actually really simple to use. Our APIs require a valid token, and you need to provide your account username and password to generate one of those tokens. On this screen, we give an example curl command of what you would need to do. It's an application JSON request. You pass in your username and password, and you hit our authentication API, and you'll get a response back, and you'll get a temporary token that is provided there. And then you can either use that token on each individual request, or you can embed it inside of a cookie. For all the other APIs, you then need to use the token as part of the API. So in this case, on top, it uses the token as part of the query. This is a curl command that is actually creating a factory URL. So there's all the things in blue are all those factory URL parameters that we had talked about. And then at the very end, this is the factory API, and you just append the token that was created from the previous call at the end of that, and it'll activate it there. And the example on the bottom here shows how to use a cookie and passing the token in as part of the cookie command, which is the -- cookie here on curl. So a lot with the APIs, we have a very rich set. They're again, in private beta internally. We're hitting on them, doing our scale tests, our functionality tests. We anticipate all those APIs being publicly available to everyone before the end of this quarter. I actually think that a lot of them will make their way out this month as well, given the progress that we've made on quality assurance with them. So moving on to the last topic, this is probably the most sophisticated topic that we have, and this is extending Codenvy with plugins and using the Codenvy SDK. So the Codenvy SDK is something that we've been working on for quite a while. It's now out in the field and used by about 20 accounts that we've been working with quietly. And just today, for the first time, we've made this SDK available for download for free without authentication on it. So you can actually go to our docs site, you can download this and install it and set it up on your own. What the SDK provides is the SDK is a Java runtime for loading, managing, and executing a plugin. It also contains a set of SDK APIs for interacting with the browser client, and it also contains a set of APIs for interacting with server systems. So you can actually write a plugin that interacts with our servers, and you can also write a plugin that generates new server code as well. So you can generate client code, generate server code. So you can use this SDK. You can download it and run it within a Tomcat on a single server project. But it is also now going to be a project type in the hosted IDE. So you don't have to do any installation, and you can still write these plugins that's there. This visual, what this shows is that we have this SDK. It's single tenant. It's for a single user. It hasn't been made open source yet, but it is going to be before very long here. The entire SDK is going to be made open source, and it uses a combination of Java, Google Web Toolkit, Gen, and Juice tooling, which are Google capabilities, and it provides a default empty IDE, a whole set of APIs for creating window-based applications within the cloud. We will ship approximately 25 to 30 of our own plugins, making them open source as well. And then there's a runtime for executing these plugins that's there. The binaries can now be downloaded at docs.codenvy.com. We're in the process of working to make the source code clonable at GitHub. And at the end of this month, sdk.codenvy.com will be updated with the hosted version of this, so that plugins can be built on a specialized cloud there. The SDK is then what powers Codenvy Enterprise. So Codenvy Enterprise takes the SDK, it loads a set of productized plugins, and then that's what makes it multiple tenant. It makes it elastic. We apply the factory capability set so that you can do the temporary workspaces with anonymous users, and then also the security and analytics foundation come with that as well. So, and also with that, we can do automated installation, we can do updates and support, and there's user dashboards and admin dashboards that come with it. Codenvy Enterprise is the very same product we use to power our public cloud at codenvy.com. And starting in 2 weeks, there will also be a free trial install of Codenvy Enterprise that can be downloaded, installed on your own hardware, and you can set up and run your own multi-tenant Codenvy Enterprise system. And then by the end of this quarter, we'll also have a full install of Codenvy Enterprise available that can be installed across many servers, as elastic as you want. And for that install, you'll need to reach out and send us an email to get more information on that. But that's probably mid-March that we'll make that available there. Back to the plugin. So if the SDK is the core of everything and the plugins are there, a plugin is then for us a packaged extension, right? And so you author it with Java, Juice, Gin, and GWT. You can debug it with both Java and JavaScript debuggers. It's compiled and packaged using Maven. It's a Java-based system. You can unit test it with JUnit. You can embed licenses into it, so you can have specialized licensing for each plugin that you do. And what happens is that when it's loaded into our system, even though it's written in Java, GWT converts it in a lazy loaded way into optimized JavaScript. So that what's get loaded into the developer's browser is pure JavaScript, and the JavaScript is loaded at the time that the user needs to have access to it. So it's very performant, and the JavaScript that is generated is cross-browser portable as well. It supports IE, Chrome, Mozilla, Firefox, right? So you get the cross-browser portability, write once, multi-browser that's there. It can then be packaged as a jar file, which is just a simple zip, and for deployment into the SDK or into our hosted cloud. And then once it's deployed as a plugin, it can be turned on and off from within the IDE. And then a little bit later this year, we'll allow factories to load particular plugins or have particular plugins turned off for the developer. A real simple hello world with this. This is a hello world extension. It's written in Java. It extends this action class, and all this action does is it prints out a dialog box. It does an alert dialog box called hello world when an action is performed. And the second thing that's here is this is the actual extension. And what's happening is that there's dependency injection that automatically happens here. And so when this plugin is loaded, there's 3 parameters up top that are passed in automatically by the Codenvy SDK. The action manager and the console part are objects that we provide in order for your plugin to gain access to the action system, and another one to gain access to the console window. And then the hello world action is the action we created on the previous slide. And all this code does is it registers this hello world action with the system. It then gets the main menu, and then it adds to the main menu the action that we just registered, the hello world action. And just for the fun of it, it then prints a hello world out to the console. And so when you run this plugin, the console in the lower right will have hello world there, and there will also be a menu item. You can see on the far left, there's in the main menu, there's a hello world item that's been added to it. And when you click on that, it opens up the dialog box on the far right, which just says hello world with an OK. So pretty straightforward stuff. It goes much further than that. Beyond that, we provide an SDK, and we have APIs for working with the system. And it's a lot like the Eclipse API set, but it's done for the browser. So we have specialized APIs for managing the editor, undo, redo, rules, annotations. You can do code assistance, such as squiggly lines, autocomplete, managing the history of commands, the outline structure, parser. There's a lot of, obviously, UI work that are native components that are available here. We have a modeling system, so you can actually, on the far right, you can create nodes, you can create links between nodes. Those nodes can have properties. If you're familiar with Eclipse, there's a technology there, EMF and GMF, but that now is available in the cloud space. You can interact with the IDE, so you can gain access to the platform as a service findings, the source code repository, events and notifications, and other resources. And then on the server side, you can inject new builders, new debuggers, and other automation elements, all through the plugin API. One last demo for you guys. This is a AngularJS plugin that that one of our partners has been developing. That's kind of in an alpha stage right now, privately. And we'll just kind of go ahead and play this here. But this is all developed using a single plugin. It's using the SDK on localhost that's there. This system doesn't have our new UI applied to it, so it's just the raw UI. But here with this single plugin, they added a new project type to the project wizard called an AngularJS project type, and there's no paths to select. But after that, it then uses Yeoman to create a scaffolded framework of an AngularJS application. And so it then has all the files that are there. And in the project, now when they go build, the plugin actually uses Grunt, right? So they wrote an extension to modify the build command, and it uses Grunt to package up, minify the code, and activate an HTML runner. And then they extended the run to make use of the proprietary HTML runner that they provided, which is going there, and they're going to click on that, open it. And it's a simple AngularJS application built off of an Yeoman there. Now you can go in, open an HTML file or an AngularJS file as well. And the other extension that they did, beyond the syntax highlighting, is they've demonstrated the ability to save, and then through the save, they can rerun, push the file there, and get the updates on it. And last but not least, also autocomplete, right? They use the same extension to integrate with the editor to do auto-completion of specific tags on it as well. And that's the last thing that's going to be shown over the final 10 seconds here. So you just hit Control Space, and there's a list of tags that are available for auto-completion. Other things that they were able to do is they were able to work with a single editor, and within a single editor, you've got HTML, JavaScript, and Angular tags, and all of them have different autocomplete capabilities. So single plugin, making use of multiple APIs, a very rich set of extensibility there for creating tooling. And with that, I know that was probably a lot to take in all at once. We didn't have a lot of time today. I am deeply appreciative of all the users that we have. I'm very thankful and appreciative of you taking the time today to listen to us and learn about that. And I'd like to open it up a little bit and see if we've got any Q&A and discuss any questions that you've got.
Yeah, so one of the questions, Tyler, here is, can I make a custom syntax highlighting?
Yes, on the plugins, it is possible to do custom syntax highlighting. It's using the same editor API that is available for doing the autocomplete on it. So essentially, with the editor API, you can take an abstract syntax tree, and then you have availability to access that syntax tree and map it to particular visual elements.
A question here about factories. You went over that pretty fast there. On the factories, where can I get the analytics for my factories that I've made?
We provide analytics on the factories that you've made for the managed factory accounts. So when you have a managed factory account, we give you a hash code to insert into the factories. And then with that, we have a login to WSO2's BAM analytics system, and it has a very rich set of dashboarding capabilities that's there. The sort of things that we provide is we show users how much time they spent on builds, runs, debugs. We'll show you the referrers, so you can see where people came from in order to click on the factories. We also then do session tracking as well, and you can actually see all the actions that people took on each session in your factory there.
Great. Let's see here. Another question. Can a developer build templates and save in the editor? I think that would be more around factories, right? Like, because you can have a factory and that factory launches each template that you would essentially build.
I think there's when it comes to templates, there's two ways to go about doing it. If the project types provided in the system are suitable for you and you just need to have a customized project, then a factory is the way to go. But if you're looking to have an actual project template that is part of the wizard, then that requires an extension to be written. You write an extension, you package it up, and with that extension there comes template formats, and then you get added in on that. And then it becomes a native part of the wizard.
Another question here. Are there any limits to the number of factories that can be created and shared?
There are no limits on the number of factories that can be created and shared. We encourage as much sharing of this as humanly possible. We're quite ecstatic about that.
Another question here. You mentioned Bitbucket. How does authentication work for repositories when creating factories and launching a new factory?
So on that question, if there's actually a four-pronged answer to that one. So it's a question of what the factory is cloning. So when you create a factory, the factory inside of it has a source that it's going to clone from in order to create the project. That source can either be an existing Codenvy workspace, which itself is either public or private, or the source can be an external code repository, which itself is public or private. If the external source, in the Bitbucket case, this is true, and also the WSO2 case, if that source is a private Git repo, the sequence that happens is the factory URL exists, the user clicks on it, Codenvy then begins its work in creating the temporary workspace. At the point in time that we then clone the private repository, we do an OAuth. We act as an OAuth consumer against the source repository. And in the case of WSO2 and Bitbucket, they've been given secret keys so to allow for us to act as an OAuth consumer. When we act as that OAuth consumer, we detect that it's a private repository, and then we basically ask the user to grant us access to that system to complete the clone that's there. So we can do it as an OAuth consumer. We can also do it with SSH keys, and we've done that with different vendors. By the end of this quarter, we will have done it with Garrett Forge as well and Project Locker. So this model seems to be getting some adoption.
One last question here we'll take is, can you pass API keys into a factory on launch? I think that's a custom variable thing.
Yeah, so passing in developer keys is the parameterized factory, which would allow for flexibility there on that.
All right, that's it for today's webinar. We'll be sending out a recording if you miss anything, and it'll also be available on the website. You can send me or Tyler questions at tyler@codenvy.com. And thank you for joining today.